It started with laughter that didn't belong in that quiet coffee shop. The kind of laughter that cuts through conversation like glass shattering on tile. 3 young men in expensive jackets sat near the window, their phones out, their voices loud enough to make the barista wince. They were filming something, or rather, someone. At a corner table, alone with his newspaper and a simple cup of black coffee, sat a man whose hands trembled slightly as he turned the page. His name was James Carter, though most people who'd known him in another life called him Sergeant Carter. He was 52 years old, with grey threading through his dark hair and a weathered face that had seen too much sun and too little peace. His left leg was missing below the knee, replaced by a prosthetic that he never complained about. Though the phantom pain sometimes kept him awake until dawn, he wore a faded denim jacket over a plain white shirt, and on his chest, barely visible beneath the collar, was a small pin shaped like an eagle. A veteran's pin, the kind earned through service, through sacrifice, through nights spent in deserts far from home, where the stars looked different and the silence felt heavier than any noise. James didn't notice the young men at first. He was reading an article about a local food drive, considering whether he might volunteer next week, despite the difficulty of standing for long periods. He'd been trying to find purpose again since coming home, since losing his leg to an explosion that also took 3 of his brothers in arms, since learning that civilian life was somehow harder to navigate than any battlefield he'd ever known. The laughter grew louder. One of the young men, the tallest with slicked back hair and a watch that probably cost more than James's monthly disability check, stood up. His friends followed, phones still recording. They approached James's table with the swagger of people who'd never faced real consequences. "Hey, old man," the tall one said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You look like you could use some energy. Let me help you out." Before James could respond, before he could even look up from his newspaper, the young man grabbed his coffee cup and dumped it. Not on the table, on James. The hot liquid splashed across his chest, soaking through his shirt, burning his skin. The newspaper fell from his hands, ink running where the coffee touched it. The shop went silent. Every conversation stopped. The barista froze mid-pour. An elderly couple by the door gasped. But the 3 young men just laughed harder, their phones capturing every second of James's shock and pain. "Whoops," the tall one said, smirking. "My bad, Grandpa. Maybe next time you should drink faster." James sat there stunned, coffee dripping from his shirt onto his lap. His hands, which had held rifles and carried wounded soldiers, trembled more now than before. Not from weakness, from the effort it took not to react, not to let the anger take over, not to show these children what a real soldier could do even with one leg. "What's wrong?" Another one of the bullies sneered, a shorter guy with a nose ring and a leather jacket that looked like it had never seen a scratch. "Cat got your tongue? Or did you lose that overseas too?" The third one, stocky with a baseball cap turned backward, kicked the leg of James's chair. "Come on, tough guy. Show us what a hero looks like." James finally looked up. His eyes, dark and deep, held something these young men couldn't understand. Not fear, not even anger, really. Just a profound sadness, the kind that comes from realizing that the country he'd bled for had raised young people who thought cruelty was entertainment. "I think you should leave," James said quietly, his voice steady despite the coffee still burning through his shirt. "Or what?" the tall one challenged, leaning closer. "You gonna hop after us?" More laughter, more phones recording. The stocky one made a show of limping in a cruel mockery of James's prosthetic leg. The customers in the shop looked away, uncomfortable, unwilling to intervene. This was someone else's problem, they told themselves. Not their business, but someone was watching, someone who wouldn't look away. At a small table near the back, half hidden behind a menu and a cup of tea, sat a young woman with honey-colored hair pulled into a ponytail. Her name was Sarah Carter, and she was 23 years old. She had her father's eyes, that same dark intensity, though hers were currently filling with tears of rage. She'd been waiting for her father to finish his coffee so they could go to his physical therapy appointment together. She'd seen the whole thing, Watch these strangers humiliate the man who used to carry her on his shoulders, who taught her to ride a bike, who came home from war broken, but still tried to smile for her every single day. Her hand was already reaching for her phone, but not to record. To call. The bullies were still laughing when Sarah stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to make them turn. She was small, barely 5'4", with freckles across her nose, and the kind of face that usually made people think of sunshine and kindness. But right now her expression was thunder. "Get away from him," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. The tall one looked her up and down and laughed. "Oh, what's this? His girlfriend? Didn't know grandpas had game like that." "I'm his daughter," Sarah said, stepping closer. "And you need to leave, now." "Or what, sweetheart?" The one with the nose ring mocked. "You gonna cry at us?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream, to hit them, to make them feel even a fraction of the pain her father felt every day. But she knew that wouldn't work. These were the kind of people who fed on confrontation, who'd twist any reaction into more content for their cruel videos. So instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd been told to only use in emergencies. A number given to her 3 years ago by a man in a black leather vest, covered in patches and road dust, who'd helped her when her car broke down on a lonely highway at midnight. The phone rang once, twice, then a deep, gravelly voice answered. "This is Axel." "It's Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah Carter. You told me to call if I ever needed help." There was a pause. Then the voice came back, sharp and focused. "What happened, kid?" Sarah looked at her father, still sitting in that chair with coffee staining his shirt, still trying to maintain his dignity while 3 strangers mocked him. She looked at their phones, still recording, still treating his pain like a joke. "They hurt my dad," she said simply. "Please, I need you. Where are you?" "Sunrise Coffee Shop, Main Street. Don't move." "We're coming." The line went dead. Sarah put her phone away and moved to her father's side, ignoring the bullies who were now filming her too. She grabbed napkins from a nearby table and started dabbing at the coffee on James's shirt, her hands gentle, her eyes fierce. "Sarah," James said softly. "It's okay. Let's just go." "No, Dad," she replied, meeting his gaze. "It's not okay." "None of this is okay." The tall bully laughed again, putting his phone in Sarah's face. "Ah, look at this. Family drama. This is going to get so many views." "You have no idea what you just did," Sarah said quietly, not looking at him, focused entirely on her father. "Oh, yeah?" the stocky one challenged. "What are you going to do about it, little girl?" Sarah didn't answer. She just helped her father stand, supporting him as he steadied himself on his prosthetic leg. The bullies continued their commentary, their phones following James's every movement as if his struggle was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. The barista finally found her voice. "Guys, I think you should leave. I'm going to call the police." "For what?" The one with the nose ring scoffed. "We didn't break any laws, just had a little accident with some coffee. Freedom of speech, right?" The shop remained frozen in uncomfortable silence. James moved slowly toward the door, Sarah at his side, the bullies trailing behind them, still filming, still laughing, still pushing for more reactions. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. Main Street was busy with shoppers and families, people going about their normal lives, unaware of what had just happened inside the coffee shop. James leaned against the brick wall, breathing hard, his hand pressed against his chest where the coffee had burned him. "Dad, we should go to the hospital," Sarah said, checking his shirt, seeing the redness of his skin beneath. "I'm fine." "Honey," James replied, though his voice was strained. "It's just coffee. I've been through worse." "That doesn't make this okay," Sarah insisted, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "They can't just do this to you. You're a veteran. You served this country. You lost your leg for them." "I didn't lose it for them," James said gently, putting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I lost it for people like you, for the freedom to live without fear, even if that means some people misuse that freedom." The bullies had followed them outside. The tall one was now doing a mocking salute, his friends recording it. "Thank you for your service," he said in an exaggerated voice. Real hero stuff, losing a leg and then getting owned by some coffee. That was when they heard it. That sound that didn't belong on that sunny afternoon street. The deep, rolling thunder of motorcycle engines growing louder, coming closer. Not just one or two bikes, many. The rumble shook the air, made windows rattle in their frames, turned heads all down Main Street. From around the corner they came. 8 motorcycles, all Harleys, all black and chrome and power. The riders wore leather vests covered in patches, their faces hidden behind sunglasses and beards, their presence commanding immediate attention. At the front rode a massive man, easily 6'5", with arms like tree trunks and a beard that reached his chest. His vest bore a name patch that read Axel in bold letters, and beneath it the words Road Captain. The bikes pulled up to the curb in perfect formation, engines idling in a low, menacing growl. Axel dismounted first, his boots hitting the pavement with a sound like judgment. The others followed, creating a wall of leather and muscle between the coffee shop and the street. The bullies had stopped laughing. Their phones were still up, but their hands were shaking now. The tall one tried to maintain his bravado, puffing out his chest. "Private property," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You can't just—" "Shut up," Axel said quietly. It wasn't a yell or a threat. Just 2 words delivered with such absolute authority that the young man's mouth snapped closed immediately. Axel's eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses, turned to Sarah. His expression softened immediately. "You okay, kid?" Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm okay. But my dad—" Axel looked at James, and something passed between them. Recognition, not of faces, but of experiences. Axel pulled off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that had seen their own share of darkness. On his forearm, partially hidden by his sleeve, was a faded tattoo. "A military insignia, Marines, Sergeant?" Axel asked, his voice gentler now. James nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. "You served." "2 tours, Afghanistan. Lost 3 good men to an ambush in Helmand Province," Axel replied. Then he looked at James's leg, at the way he was standing, favoring his prosthetic. "ID? Fallujah. 2008, James confirmed. Axel turned back to the bullies, and his expression transformed. The kindness vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. The other bikers moved closer, forming a semicircle that trapped the 3 young men against the coffee shop wall. "So let me get this straight," Axel said, his voice low and dangerous. "You 3 thought it would be funny to throw coffee on a disabled veteran, a man who sacrificed his body for this country, for your freedom. And you filmed it. For entertainment." The tall one tried to speak, his earlier confidence completely gone. "We didn't. We were just—" "I asked you to shut up," Axel interrupted. "I'm not done talking." One of the other bikers, a lean man with a scarred face and a vest patch that read Chains, stepped forward. He held out his hand, palm up. "Phones now. You can't just take up," the stocky one started. Chains didn't move, didn't speak again. He just stood there, hand extended, waiting. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, shakily, the 3 young men handed over their phones. Chains scrolled through the videos, his jaw tightening with each second. Then he held up the screen, showing the footage to Axel. The video showed James sitting quietly, reading his newspaper. Peaceful. Then it showed the tall bully approaching with the coffee, laughing as he poured it on the veteran. Capturing James's shock and pain in high definition. "Delete it," Axel ordered. But the tall one protested weakly. A 3rd biker moved closer. This one was older, maybe in his 60s, with grey in his beard and tattoos that had faded with time. His vest patch read Hammer. He spoke in a voice rough from years of road dust and cigarette smoke. "Son, I'm going to give you some free education right now. You see these vests? These patches? We're Hell's Angels. You know what that means?" The 3 bullies shook their heads, their faces pale now. "It means we've seen real violence, real cruelty, real evil, and we've spent our lives riding against it. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We stand up when everyone else looks away," Hammer continued. "And right now, looking at you 3, I'm seeing the kind of cowards who pick on a man who's already been through more pain than you could imagine. The kind who think suffering is content for your little internet videos. Delete the videos, Axel repeated. All of them. And any backups you have in your cloud storage. The tall one's hands trembled as he took his phone back. He opened the video app, found the footage, and his finger hovered over the delete button. For a moment, it looked like he might refuse. Then Axel took one step closer, and the young man quickly tapped delete. Cloud storage, Chains reminded him. The bully navigated to his cloud account, permanently deleted the videos. His friends did the same, their bravado completely shattered. Good, Axel said. Now comes the hard part. You're going to apologize? We're sorry, the tall one mumbled immediately, not looking up. Not to me, genius, Axel growled. To him. He pointed at James, who stood watching the entire scene with a mix of disbelief and something that might have been gratitude. Sarah was still at his side, holding his arm, her earlier tears replaced by a look of fierce satisfaction. The three young men shuffled forward, their eyes on the ground. The tall one spoke first, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, sir. We shouldn't have done that. It was wrong. The other two echoed similar sentiments, their apologies hollow and forced, driven by fear rather than genuine remorse. James looked at them for a long moment. These children who had no idea what the world was really like, who had never known hardship or sacrifice or what it meant to put your life on the line for strangers. I forgive you, James said quietly. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. What you did today you'll carry with you. Remember this feeling, this fear, this shame. And next time you see someone struggling, someone different, someone who's been through something you can't understand, maybe you'll choose kindness instead of cruelty. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that standing up for what's right takes courage, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every click helps spread stories of real compassion when the world needs it most. The bullies nodded, still unable to meet James's eyes. Axel gestured toward the street. Now get out of here! And if I ever hear about you pulling something like this again, if any of my brothers ever see you disrespecting another veteran, another person who can't defend themselves, we'll find you. And next time, we won't be this nice, they ran. Actually ran, stumbling over each other in their haste to get away. Their expensive jackets and designer clothes looked ridiculous as they fled down Main Street, glancing back over their shoulders to make sure the bikers weren't following. When they were gone, the tension finally broke. Axel turned to James and Sarah, his expression softening again. The other bikers relaxed their stances, some of them lighting cigarettes, others checking their phones. You doing okay, brother? Axel asked James. James nodded slowly, still processing everything that had just happened. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. You don't owe us anything, Axel replied. What you did, what you gave for this country, that's the real debt. We're just evening the scales a little. Sarah stepped forward and, without warning, hugged Axel. The massive biker went still for a moment, clearly not used to such displays of affection, then awkwardly patted her back. Thank you, Sarah said, her voice muffled against his leather vest. Thank you for coming, for caring, for being here when no one else would help. Axel gently extracted himself from the hug, looking uncomfortable but pleased. Your old man taught you good, calling when you needed help. Smart girl. How do you two know each other? James asked, confused. Sarah stepped back, wiping her eyes again, but smiling now. 3 years ago, my car broke down on Highway 47 at like midnight. I was alone, scared, and my phone was almost dead. Axel and some of his brothers were riding past. They stopped, helped me fix my tire, and followed me all the way home to make sure I got there safe. Before he left, he gave me his number and told me to call if I ever needed anything. I never thought I'd actually use it. Axel shrugged, but there was warmth in his eyes. That's what we do. Look out for people. Chains spoke up, his scarred face breaking into what might have been a smile. Plus, any daughter of a veteran is family to us. We take care of family. The barista from the coffee shop emerged, carrying a bag and a cup. She approached nervously, clearly intimidated by the bikers, but determined. She handed the bag to James. Sir, I'm so sorry about what happened. I should have done something sooner. This is a fresh shirt from our merchandise and a new coffee. On the house. For life, actually. You come here any time, you don't pay. James accepted the gifts with grace, thanking her quietly. The barista nodded and hurried back inside, but not before giving Axel an appreciative look. Hammer, the older biker, stepped forward and extended his hand to James. Marine Corps, 72 to 76 Vietnam, welcome home. Brother. James shook his hand, and in that grip, in that simple gesture, passed an understanding that only those who'd served could truly know. The weight of memories, the burden of survival, the quiet pride of having stood when called. One by one, the other bikers introduced themselves. Chains had been Army, deployed to Desert Storm. A younger biker named Sparks had served in the Navy on an aircraft carrier. Another named Diesel had been Air Force, stationed in Korea. Not all of them had served, but all of them respected those who had. You have plans right now? Axel asked James. James glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. We were heading to my physical therapy appointment, but honestly, after all this, I think I need a minute to just breathe. Come with us, Axel said. It wasn't really a request, more like a gentle command. There's someone you should meet. Someone who'll want to hear what happened today. Sarah helped her father into the back of the coffee shop to change into the new shirt, wiping the coffee stains from his skin as best as she could. The burn wasn't too serious, more of a painful redness than anything requiring medical attention, but she was still furious every time she looked at it. Are you sure about this, Dad? Sarah asked quietly as James buttoned the new shirt. We don't have to go with them if you're not comfortable. James smiled, really smiled, for the first time since the incident. Sarah, honey, I haven't felt this comfortable in years. These are my people, and that Axel, he's good folk. I can tell. When they emerged, the bikers were waiting patiently, some smoking, some chatting in low voices. Axel had made a phone call and was just hanging up as James and Sarah approached. All set? Axel asked. Where are we going? Sarah wanted to know. Our clubhouse. It's not fancy, but it's home. And there's someone there who organizes support for veterans in need. Name's Caroline. She's a civilian, but she's done more for vets than most of the VA combined, Axel explained. He gestured to two bikes. You two can ride with us. Sarah, you're with me. James, you'll ride with Diesel. He's got a passenger seat that's got good support, easy on the leg. James hesitated. I haven't been on a motorcycle since before my deployment. Then it's time to remember what freedom feels like, Hammer said, grinning. Come on, brother. We'll take it easy. Diesel, a stocky biker with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor despite his size, helped James onto the back of his bike, making sure the prosthetic leg was positioned comfortably. Sarah climbed behind Axel, wrapping her arms around his waist and trusting this stranger who'd come to their rescue. The engines roared to life again, that same powerful rumble that had announced their arrival. But now, instead of being ominous, it felt protective, like thunder that promised rain after a drought, promising relief and renewal. They rode through Main Street, 8 bikes in formation, with James Carter, disabled veteran, and his daughter Sarah in their midst. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared. Some waved. A few veterans in the crowd stood at attention, recognizing one of their own, paying respect. For James, the wind in his face, the rumble of the engine beneath him, the brotherhood surrounding him. It felt like coming home after a long deployment. The tension in his shoulders eased. The pain in his leg faded to the background. For the first time in years, since losing his leg, since learning to walk again, since struggling to find his place in a world that had moved on without him, James felt like he belonged. Sarah, riding behind Axel, couldn't stop smiling despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. She'd made the right choice, calling for help. These rough men with their tattoos and leather, these Hell's Angels who most people feared or misunderstood, they were heroes in their own way. They were the ones who showed up when everyone else looked away. The clubhouse was on the edge of town, a large building that had once been a warehouse. Outside, dozens more motorcycles were parked in neat rows. The Hell's Angels insignia, that fierce skull with wings, was painted on the wall, faded from weather but still proud and defiant. As the bikes pulled up and engines cut off, James and Sarah dismounted. The clubhouse door opened and more bikers emerged, along with a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair pulled back in a braid. She wore jeans and a simple black shirt, but her presence commanded respect just as much as any of the bikers. "Axel called ahead," she said, her voice strong and clear. "You must be James Carter. I'm Caroline." She extended her hand, and James shook it, noting her firm grip and the directness of her gaze. "Come inside," Caroline continued. "We need to talk about what happened today. And more importantly, we need to talk about what we're going to do about it." As they walked toward the clubhouse, Sarah close to her father's side, Axel and his brothers following behind like an honor guard, James realized something important. The incident at the coffee shop, as painful and humiliating as it had been, had led him here, to people who understood, to a community he didn't know he needed. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The Hells Angels clubhouse, rough and worn on the outside, welcomed them in with warmth and the smell of coffee and something cooking. Inside, the walls were covered with photos, patches, memorabilia from rides across the country, and prominently displayed a large American flag next to flags from every branch of the military. Inside the clubhouse, Caroline led James and Sarah to a comfortable space with worn leather couches and warm lighting. The bikers gathered around, some sitting, others leaning against walls, all listening intently. What happened today shouldn't happen to anyone, especially not to those who served, Caroline began, pouring coffee for James and Sarah. "But I want you to know you're not alone anymore." She explained that she ran a network supporting veterans, connecting them with jobs, medical care, and community. Axel and his brothers helped transport supplies, organize fundraisers, and when needed, provide protection. "We've helped over 200 veterans in the past 5 years, Caroline said proudly. "And we'd be honored to help you too, James." James felt emotion welling up. For so long, he'd struggled alone, too proud to ask for help, believing he should handle everything himself. But looking around at these faces, these strangers who'd become allies, he realized that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was strength. Over the next hour they talked. Caroline connected James with a better physical therapist and a job opportunity at a veteran-owned business. Axel promised that he and his brothers would check on James regularly, making sure he had everything he needed. Sarah watched her father's face transform. The shame and pain from earlier were replaced by something she hadn't seen in years, hope, as the sun set completely. Casting the clubhouse in warm shadows, Axel walked James and Sarah to their car, which James had driven over from the coffee shop. "Thank you," James said, shaking Axel's hand firmly. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost." "What's that?" Axel asked. "Faith in people," James replied simply. 3 weeks later, James started his new job. The Bullies were never seen again on Main Street, their lesson learned. And every Sunday, James and Sarah rode with the Hells Angels, not as victims needing rescue, but as family. Because sometimes the roughest outsides protect the kindest hearts. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say, "Not today." Not to him. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe.